Tonight we're going to be in Luke chapter 22 into chapter 23, and we're going to be looking at the trial of Jesus Christ. We're going to talk about the chief priests, the rulers, and the Son of the Father. Okay, the chief priests, the rulers, and the Son of the Father. I have a dad. I assume that everyone here somewhere has a father. That's the one thing that all of us have in common. And, most of you know my dad, all right? There are definitely a lot of things that are different about us, but there's also a lot of similarities. I was one time in a restaurant in Portland, and I had somebody walk up to me out of the blue, and they said, "Do you happen to be Gary Davis's son?" And I was like, "Yeah, how'd you know that?" And he said, "Oh, I'm a pastor up here in Portland, but I was just hearing you talk and watching you, and I thought that's got to be Gary Davis's son." And I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." Since I'm adopted, but no, it's there are similarities, and I can remember one time being up in British Columbia, Canada, with my uncle. We were in a restaurant waiting, in line, and he was talking to me, and he said, "One thing that's really interesting about your dad is he is so friendly and just talks to everybody that for some reason, whenever I go anywhere with your dad, he runs into somebody he knows." And I was like, "Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true." And then I turn around, and I was like, "Oh, hi, Agnes. We're in Canada." And I'm like, "Hi, Agnes, how are you?" And she's like, "Oh, hi, Tim," and talking to me. And my uncle was like, "You know her?" And I was like, "Yeah, she goes to our church." But, it's one of those things. There are similarities, between me and my father. And that's one of those things tonight that we're going to begin to see some things going on with that. Jesus Christ said, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Father." And that's one of the incredible things. When we study the Gospels of Jesus and we read about the life, the ministry, the teachings, the miracles of Jesus, how he interacted, we are literally seeing the Father's actions at work, which is really important, especially in a day and age like ours, where a lot of people want to think that the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament are two totally different people, two totally different characters. Not true at all. When you read them together, you realize how consistent it is. And when you've seen Jesus, you have seen the Father. We're going to pick this up at Luke 22, verse 66. Now, just a little caveat here. When we studied Luke 22 last Wednesday and over the weekend, if you remember, I took it out of order. We didn't do it in a linear fashion, which ended up confusing me. And as I prepared everything, I thought we were just in Luke 23, and it didn't hit me until I was on my way here tonight that we didn't end Luke 22. So literally, we threw this in at the last minute, but it goes along with it. It's the beginning of the trials of Jesus Christ. And this is what we read. "When day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both the chief priests and the scribes, and they led Jesus away to their council. And they said, 'If you are the Christ, tell us.' But he said to them, 'If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God.' And so they all said, 'Are you the Son of God?' Then, and he said to them, 'You say that I am.' Then they said, 'What further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips.'" This is the first of many trials that Jesus would have in one evening. It happens before the Sanhedrin, the elders of the people, the chief priests and the scribe. These were the rulers. At this time in Jerusalem and throughout the area, what you had were governors that were put in place by the Roman Empire. Up in Galilee, there was a governor who was the son of Herod the Great, Herod the Tetrarch. Down in Jerusalem, you had another Roman governor named Pilate, or as some of you might look at it, you might think it's Pilate, but there's no S on the end, so it's Pilate. But you look at it, and he was a Roman governor, and their main job was twofold. They were to keep the peace, make sure there were no riots going on or anything, just keep the peace, and collect taxes. That's it. It was up to local governments to then run everything. And in Jerusalem and in Judea, it was this group. There were 70 elders, mainly made up of Sadducees, some Pharisees, priests and scribes that were there. And they pretty much ran the day-to-day life and made the ordinances and the rules for the people. Now, they were not allowed to hear cases of capital punishment. Actually, just about roughly 2 years before this, the emperor had taken away that authority from them. Before this time, they had been able to perform capital punishment for people that broke their rules, but it had been taken away. They were able to do other things, but not that. They had rules for how they were supposed to handle court cases. And it's interesting because, like, if you look at some commentaries, they are breaking in this section up to 18 of their own laws by the way they are bringing Jesus to trial. These trials were supposed to happen during the day, not at night. They were supposed to happen in public with an announcement to everybody, not in secret. They were supposed to happen in such a way where the defendant had somebody, a lawyer, to advocate for them. Jesus did not have that. Anything that the defendant said about themselves could not be held against them. That is exactly what they did here. Jesus said something, and they're saying that's enough. And in order to convict somebody, they were supposed to have 2 to 3 witnesses. None of that took place. There was just rule after rule, law after law that they made themselves that they broke with this trial of Jesus Christ. And it's incredible when you look at this. He's led there, and they're trying to just ascertain what is happening. Right off the bat, they ask, are you the Christ? Are you the Christ? It's the Hebrew of that word is Messiah, meaning, are you the anointed one? The one that was spoken about in Old Testament prophecies, the one that was prophesied, the one that would come and rule over Jerusalem and would make Israel independent. Are you he? And it's interesting because Jesus just flat out tells them, I'm not going to talk to you about that. If I say I am, you're not going to believe me. If I say I'm not, you're not going to answer back. And he simply just says, from now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God. And they take that statement right there to be enough for them to say, that's it, we're killing this guy. Why? What is going on? As Jesus says this, it's actually a reference, and they knew it that fast. It goes back to the book of Daniel, chapter 7, and specifically verses 13 to 14. Daniel 7 is a vision where Daniel is seeing the Ancient of Days. He's seeing the throne room of God. And when you get to verse 13, you read this. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. All of these religious leaders, these priests and these scribes, that quickly knew what title he was putting on himself, what prophecy he was alluding to, saying that I am the one who is coming before the Ancient of Days. I am here as a judge, I am here as a king, and my rule will be forever. And if you notice, he quotes from that passage saying that he is the Son of Man, and their response back to them is, wait, are you saying you're the Son of Man? Their response is, wait a minute, are you saying you're the Son of God? And that's what they are recognizing. It's often said today that Jesus never said that he was the Messiah, that Jesus never said that he was God or anything like that. Anyone who says that just really hasn't studied the Gospels. When we read it through our lens of being in the United States, 2,000 years after the time of Christ, there's a lot we miss. Jewish readers catch things that we don't. And there are things that they're catching back then that we simply overlook. Like this part where Jesus is saying, I am the Son of Man. They knew it that fast. And for them, that was blasphemy. Other places, when you look at the Old Testament, the New Testament, where Jesus is just asked, like, who are you, or different things. Like one statement he made was, before Abraham was, what did he say? I am. Before Abraham was, I am. So he is saying he wasn't just born in Bethlehem during that time. He was from all the way back at the beginning. He was even before Abraham. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And if you note this, when he says, I am, there's something that he is referencing. Goes all the way back to Exodus chapter 3. When Moses stood in front of the burning bush, he was told to take off his sandals. Why? Oh, yeah. Let's allude to that song, right? Yeah. He's standing on holy ground. And God meets him in that place. Moses is given a message and a mission, and he can perform miracles. But he says, when I go to my people, they're going to ask who you are. What do I tell them your name is? And what he says is, I will be who I will be. I will be who I will be. That's how it's directly translated in Hebrew. Now, about 150 years before the time of Christ, the scribes translated the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek. And when they translated it from Hebrew to Greek, they used the words there, ego and me, which means I am that I am, or I am who I will be. It's not direct because, let's be honest, Hebrew isn't Greek. Just like Greek isn't English, and English is not Swahili. No language is exactly the same. So it translates from I will be who I will be into the Greek, I am who I am, and it's the ego and me. Tell them I am sent me. That's why in the Gospel of John, there's 7 miracles, and then there's 7 statements that Jesus makes. They are the I am statements, the statements that he makes about himself, of him being that I am. Jesus is declaring this right here very boldly. And they look at it and they're just saying like, all right, what more do we need from this? He just said he is that Son of Man. He is directly saying he is the Son of God. He's the Son of God. The story goes on in the next chapter with verse 1. Then the whole company of them arose and brought Jesus before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man misleading our nation, forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king." And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered him, "You have said so." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." But they were urgent, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place." So they are accusing in their own council Jesus of blasphemy because they don't believe that he is the Son of God. They don't believe he is the Christ, the Messiah. But they can't kill him themselves. They can't perform capital punishment anymore. So they have to bring Jesus to Pilate, the governor in Jerusalem, and get Pilate to give a guilty sentence. And so what do? They come up with 3 accusations. The first one, this man is misleading our nation. He's leading the nation astray. That's false. They have heard Jesus teach in the temple courts all this week. For the previous 3.5 years, different religious leaders had debated with him, fenced with him, and they couldn't get him on anything. His teaching was always true. It was solid. They are the ones misleading Pilate. The second accusation they give to Pilate is he's forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar. He's telling people not to pay taxes. Was that true? No, we studied in Luke just a few weeks ago how they tried to trap Jesus with that. And he literally said, "Whose face is on this coin?" Well, it's Caesar's. All right. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God. Jesus never said, "Don't pay taxes to the government." He never said that. Today, there are some Christians who believe that kind of teaching, that, as Christians, we should not pay taxes to the government. They're part of a denomination called criminals. And you look at it, that's just the reality of it, right? It's a crime. That wasn't true. However, the third accusation, he has said that he is the Christ, the anointed one, a king. And it's interesting because the way Luke records this, Pilate asks him directly. He doesn't respond to the other two. He doesn't respond to that at all. He's responding, "Wait a second, are you king of the Jews?" And he's like, "You said it, not me." To which Pilate's like, "I don't find anything wrong with this man. I don't find anything wrong with them." Now, it's hard to put it all together time-wise. Why is Pilate saying that right there? It might be that really he doesn't find anything wrong, although it would seem that that would be something he should be concerned about if Jesus is saying he's a Jew. But one of the things we learn from another gospel is that Pilate's wife is there in Jerusalem with him. And she comes to him and says, don't have anything to do with this man who's on trial right now. Like, get away from him. I was warned about this in a dream. That's pretty amazing right there. If only Pilate had listened to his wife. Verse 6. When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent Jesus over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at that time. Herod would have been there in order to celebrate the Passover. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned Jesus at some length, but he made no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod, with his soldiers, treated Jesus with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day. For before this, they had been at enmity with each other. As we read that, we see that Pilate thinks he has a way out of this. Pilate's on a precarious perch at this time. He had already gotten himself sideways with the Jewish leaders. His first big mistake was when he put Roman flags up in the temple courts. And there was a riot that took place. It was actually Caesar that had to step in and tell Pilate, like, knock it off. You're supposed to be there to keep the peace, not create a problem. Pilate also was known to send spies into the temple courts to cause problems with people and even arrest people for different things. He was not popular with the Jewish leaders. At the same time, he was not in a good position with Caesar as well. In fact, it wouldn't be that many more years after this that Pilate would end up getting his governorship revoked by Caesar. So for him, it was just a gift to find out that Jesus was Galilean. For him, it's an out. Well, he must be one of Herod's subjects, so I'll just send him back to Herod. We found out earlier in this gospel that after Herod had killed John the Baptist, he really wanted to be able to meet Jesus. He wanted to be able to see some kind of miraculous sign take place. But now that Jesus is before him, note, Jesus doesn't play the game. He doesn't play the game. He knows that Herod is just testing him, so he remains silent before him. Again, Jesus, first before the Sanhedrin, the only thing they can find him guilty of is claiming to be exactly who he is. Jesus, then before, and now I'm wanting to say Pilates, Pilate, and Pilate can't find anything wrong with him. Herod, once again, Herod can't accuse him of anything. And so the story goes on in verse 13. Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people. And he said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish him and then release him." Verse 18. But they all cried out together, Away with this man and release to us Barabbas, a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus. But they kept shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will, therefore, punish and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified. And their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. As we look at this, there was a custom that once a year at the Passover, the governor would release one prisoner. And so Pilate thought he had a way out again. Well, there's nothing wrong. He shouldn't be punished. I'll just tell them I'll punish him a bit, but then why don't you just release him? And they cry out, "No, we want Barabbas out." Barabbas. What do we know about Barabbas? Very little. Very little. What did Barabbas look like? I don't know. Although in my mind, I have an image that's been created by movies. If you look at Christian movies, whenever you see Barabbas, he's typically, he's like somebody that you would think was from San Quentin. And, he's just like wild. You always see him with a wild beard. Maybe like the Jewish version of Blackbeard almost, right? And in some of the depictions, just kind of going crazy and stuff. I'm not sure that's probably what we should have in our minds. After all, they're asking for this guy to be released. When we think murderer, we think probably like Jeffrey Dahmer or something. He is an insurrectionist. He is charged with murder and with theft. There were all kinds of people during this time that were insurrectionists. And when they would fight, they would kill. It doesn't say he's a zealot, but he was probably somebody like that. In many ways, it wouldn't be unlike if we went back in our history to the Revolutionary War to those colonists, those rebels, and one who was overzealous, but still one of them. He's an insurrectionist who is trying to free the Jewish people. Might he have committed murder? Yeah, that's what it appears. And in another one, he's a robber, in another gospel. What else do we know about him? Well, that's about it, except for his name. His name. What is his name? His name is Barabbas. Bar is son. If you look at it, in Acts, there is a magician, a false prophet named Bar Jesus, and his name means son of Joshua, okay? You look at a man who was one of Paul's friends. His name was Levi, but in the book of Acts, he was such an encourager to everybody that they changed his name to Barnabas. he became the son of encouragement. So Barabbas, the bar is son. Look at the other name. Abba. No, does not mean dancing queen, all right? It means father. It means father. Now, back then, two things. Names were important and meant something about a person's character. And whenever someone was declared a son of somebody, they were supposed to take on the character of that father of theirs. So think about this. You have one on trial who is the Son of Man, the Son of God, holy, righteous, innocent. And on the other side, you have another man on trial, Barabbas, the son of the Father. He is a murderer. He is a thief. And he is an insurrectionist. And the way Luke frames it, it is the will of the people there not to choose the innocent son of righteousness, son of the holy, most high God, but to choose the Son of the Father, who is a rebel, a murderer, and a thief. And at that, Jesus goes to the cross. What would we choose? What would we choose? And I think that's important. I was recently mentioned this a few weeks ago, but in a conversation with a friend of mine who just said, I don't understand the book of Revelation when it talks about the millennial reign of Christ, because at the millennial reign of Christ, Satan is bound and chained up for 1,000 years. And during that time, Christ is ruling and reigning. But after that, Satan is released and people rebel. That's exactly what we see here. People choosing not to come underneath the authority of the Most High God, his Son of righteousness, the King of kings and the Lord of lords, but becoming insurrectionists and by their own will choosing to go another way, which is exactly what we see from Genesis chapter 3 through the rest of the Bible. We have a choice who we are going to come under. And I love it that I can look around this room, and this room is full of people that are nodding their heads and saying, yeah, I choose Christ. I choose Christ. And that's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I love it that in the book of Revelation, when John hears that there are 144,000 Jewish people that have come in to the kingdom, he turns around and looks, and what he sees is not 144,000 Jewish people. Instead, what he sees is a multitude that no one can count from every tribe, nation, tongue, and people. Absolutely amazing. But there's more people that need to hear that story, that need to hear that. And let me just end with this, maybe just to bring more beauty to a passage that we all know so well. John wrote in his gospel, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God.